There are places in Europe where the silence feels calculated, as if something below the surface is holding its breath. Places where the snow settles softly over abandoned entrances, rusty rails disappear into the forest, and the earth itself seems to hide a memory it refuses to release. One of those places is the Owl Mountains of Lower Silesia, a region carved by war, rumor, secrecy, and the obsessive ambitions of a dying regime. During the final years of the Second World War, when the Third Reich was collapsing under the weight of its own delusion, the Nazi leadership directed incredible amounts of manpower, material, and scientific personnel toward one project: Reese, the Giant. It was not a bunker, not a shelter, not only a headquarters. It was something else. The scale of the Reese complex still defies explanation. More than 9 kilometers of tunnel already confirmed, and potentially dozens more still sealed or undiscovered. Chambers the size of cathedrals buried under mountains. Walls reinforced with concrete so thick that modern drills struggle to penetrate them. Entire sections polished smooth as if prepared for machinery that was never installed. And then, nothing. The war ended, and it was all simply abandoned. But abandoned does not mean empty. To understand the true nature of these tunnels, we have to understand the organization responsible for some of the most obscure projects of the Nazi hierarchy: the Ahnenerbe, the research branch of the SS. Contrary to the caricatured version often depicted in films, the Ahnenerbe was not a cult of mystics chasing legends. It was a massive scientific apparatus, with archaeologists, linguists, engineers, physicians, psychologists, mathematicians. Their goal was ideological, but their methodology was rigorous. They studied symbols. They studied the nervous system. They studied human perception. And in the final phase of the war, their research grew increasingly desperate and increasingly strange. Fragments of SS documents recovered after 1945 mention experiments in symbolic cognition, visual resonance, and neurological response patterns. None of these terms meant anything at the time. Today, they align disturbingly well with what modern cognitive science considers techniques to subtly influence perception. This brings us to the myth and the mystery of Base 211. In popular conspiracy theories, Base 211 is often associated with Antarctica. But in the world of this narrative, and in a handful of obscure wartime sources, Base 211 was not built on a frozen continent. It was concealed under the mountains of Silesia, a hidden extension of the Reese network, accessible only through sealed tunnels and coded passages. A structure designed not merely for protection, but for experimentation. Imagine a space where the Ahnenerbe attempted to merge ancient esoteric systems with modern scientific understanding. A laboratory where geometric patterns, frequencies, sensory deprivation, and symbolic structures were tested on unwilling subjects. A place where the boundaries between myth and research blurred, not because they sought magic, but because they believed symbols could shape the human mind. Then imagine what happened in 1945. Orders to evacuate. Documents burned in a hurry. Equipment removed or destroyed. Sections of tunnels explosively sealed from within. Soviet troops stormed some entrances. American intelligence reached others. Both sides found the same thing: massive underground structures with no clear purpose. Some chambers showed evidence of electrical installations without any cables left behind. Others had marks on the floor consistent with heavy machinery that had been moved, or removed, quickly. And in several locations, symbols were carved or painted on the walls: triangles, spirals, concentric circles. Not German military symbols. Something older. Something that researchers, decades later, would identify as similar to markings found in esoteric traditions, including signs attributed to the mysterious Naacal. The Reese complex is already one of the greatest unresolved mysteries of the 20th century. But Base 211, the supposed hidden heart of it, is something more. It is the conceptual bridge between the real world of underground construction and the speculative world of psychological manipulation, perception research, and the hidden ambitions of the SS. In the novel, Base 211 becomes the convergence point where ancient symbolic knowledge meets modern neurotechnology. A place where a forgotten code, the Naacal Protocol, is rediscovered. A place where manipulation of perception becomes a scientific tool. But in reality, the truth is that the tunnels beneath Silesia contain enough unanswered questions to make any investigator wonder whether something deeper was intended there. Why build chambers so large? Why construct tunnels that lead to nowhere? Why seal entire sections so thoroughly that they remain inaccessible 80 years later? And what research was important enough to be hidden underground, yet never documented clearly in surviving archives? The mountain remembers. The stone remembers, even if the documents do not. In the next episode, we will uncover Gateway X, the classified file that bridges Nazi underground research, Cold War intelligence programs, and the modern conflict in Ukraine. A file that reveals how a forgotten operation from 1945 reemerges today in the struggle for perception, resources, and cognitive dominance. A file that exposes the hidden continuity between past experiments and the geopolitical battles shaping our present. My name is Adelio Debenedetti, and this is my novel. Follow additional content on www.protocollonaacl.it/blog to discover the documents and the historical research behind this story. And don't forget to follow the podcast for new episodes of the Naacal Protocol.